Great. So one of our panelists has, as I said, been detained and has not been able to get back with us yet, but we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Pam Strickland. I'm the founder of North Carolina Stop Human Trafficking, and I am our organization is one of three that came together to start the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. And Nicole Bernard is on here as well. She is the founder of Shield North Carolina, and she's having some tech issues, so I don't think she's going to be able to turn. Can you turn your camera on or no, Nicole?
I'm trying to. I'm trying to. I am here.
Okay, we're glad you're here. And I also want to say welcome to Autumn, who is at the moment our only panelist. So what I'm going to do, Autumn, is to give you a chance to introduce yourself. And then if our other panelist hasn't arrived yet, we will move on to some of the questions that we've talked about.
Hi, I'm Autumn. I'm 33. I kind of got introduced into human trafficking when I was in my early 20s. I'd never heard of it before, wasn't sure what it was. Just happened to be at a conference where it was being talked about. And that's when it dawned on me that this wasn't something that was happening in other countries and other parts of the world, but it was something that had happened to me when I think my earliest memory is about 5 years old. My birth mother started trafficking me so that she could afford her drugs and keep up her habit. And that went on until I was probably 14, late 14, early 15. Just a constant, weekly thing, sometimes nightly. And it was normal for me. I never questioned it. I never thought anything else about it. I got put into the system right after that, moved around to a bunch of foster homes. Always felt like something was different with me, but I was never really sure until I went to this conference and the lady explained what human trafficking was, and she was like, this is not right, it's not okay, it's not normal. And my immediate reaction was, you're wrong, it is normal because it's what I lived. And since then I really began my healing and journey of figuring out all of the ins and outs and how those things affected me and coming out the other side and how to deal with them. The last 5 or 6 years, I've really been focused with working with other human trafficking organizations to kind of put a stop to it. And then in the last year, I really felt pulled to the demand reduction side of things because, I mean, we can stand up and we can talk and we can tell our stories and say that this is bad all day long, but until we address why it's happening and how to slow that down or stop it from happening, then it's never going to stop. So I think that's a little bit about me. I'm married. I have 2 dogs. I was adopted about 5 years ago as an adult, and my adoptive parents are fantastic. I am a part of a little home church that is really focused on community, and I like working retail and just kind of helping out with human trafficking where I can, when I can.
Autumn, I just want to say I admire you so much for the strength, first of all, to just make it through that and come out on the other side, and for the strength to actually share your story. And just really want to say thank you for being here with us and sharing such a personal experience so that others can learn and grow from it. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you're specifically interested in demand reduction. Um, so one of our very first questions is, can you tell us a little bit about the typical buyers that you experienced?
Um, when I got these questions, I sort of giggled over that first question because, like, typical buyer, there's not really a such thing. They range so dramatically. Like, it's not, you can't point somebody out and go, oh, yeah, they definitely are in the human trafficking game. It's everyone from people in business suits and, I mean, even women, other women, um, to the people that you would kind of think or associate with what a buyer or a John would look like. So, like, in my experience, there's just not a typical. It's it's more on anyone is susceptible to that.
Would you say, for instance, was there an age range? I mean, were most of them older adults, middle-aged, young people, or just truly a wide range?
It is true for in my experience, anyways. It was truly just a wide range.
Mhm,
There were, I guess, I mean, they would be older, um, 30s to 40s, but I mean, I also, like, there was some that I remember, like, that were part of my earliest memories that were repeat buyers, I guess would be the appropriate
mhm.
usage of that, who came, like, throughout my childhood, and for a long time, like, I considered them family because I kinda watched them age and they watched me age, and so it really just kinda depends. I think it has a lot to do with background and their personal experiences too, as to when you kind of bridge the gap from that being a thought to it being an action that you follow through on.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, do you have any thoughts, just from your own lived experience on what it is that drives a buyer's behavior?
Um, I would say honestly, I think porn plays a big role in it. I think some of it is spiritual, like when you open that door for that sort of thing to come in, it can only fulfill you so much until you progress to, you know, more abusive tops, and then that can only fulfill you so much. And so it's kind of like an addiction. That first hit is fantastic, but you'll never get that first hit again. It goes downhill. And I think mental health plays a lot in it. Like, I've known people who just weren't really there. And it's just a thing that was taught to them by their parents or was normalized, that women are just an object or just something to be used, which goes into the next of your upbringing. There's so many different factors that play into it, and it's not one of those things where you can say hurt people or abuse people, because not all abused people turn that way, and not all hurt people turn that way. It has to be a conscious decision. And so, like, I feel like personally there needs to be some type of stop between you having those thoughts to a John school or you being arrested and, convicted the first time. There needs to be a place where these people can come and freely say, okay, I'm having these thoughts and it's not something I want to do. How do I stop that? Because that's not readily available.
Mhm. That's a really interesting idea. I have never heard it posed like that. And um, it'd be interesting if we could figure out a way to make that happen, right? That people
Yeah.
would feel comfortable enough to say that they're having those thoughts. What kind of a venue or where can you make something like that happen? So yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. Um, can you think of anything that you think would deter buyers?
Um, I think personal experience or a connection with it. I met one who he was one of my abusers, and many years later, um, he reached back out and was like, "I have a daughter, and I'm so incredibly sorry,"
Wow.
because it just it puts it into perspective. But outside of mental health, and help, honestly, and then hearing how it impacts other people, I think those are 2 things that would play a big role, but outside of that, I'm not sure,
Mm,
because I think honestly some of them just don't you don't realize, like, if you've been trained and you have that mindset of this is just a like, this is not a person, this is just a thing that I'm
mhm,
using, then there's no connect, there's no, emotional attachment to feel bad about later on.
mhm. Do you feel like perhaps, and this is just, I'm asking this based on some research that we have read. Do you feel like there were some of the buyers that were there as a one-time thing and it was just, a for fun thing versus some buyers who, and you mentioned having repeats that for whom it might have been a compulsion. I mean, did you see, could, and understanding you were a child too, so I mean, you may not have been able to perceive the difference in that.
Yeah, looking back, I mean, there was, you know, when I first started like my healing journey, I did multiple types of therapy and counseling. And I mean, for a while, it was like just really overwhelming at the many faces that I remember and I have memories of, but not enough for them to be formative or for me to know what that person's name was. Um, but then, like, there are some memories where, like I said, there was, repeat buyers, like where it was a compulsion and honestly just derangement. And I think mental health really played a huge deal in that. Um, but yeah, I would say some people do experiment and think, okay, we'll try this once and see, or they get dragged into it, and then don't go any further with it.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. So, you mentioned that your mother was your trafficker.
Mhm.
Um, so how did the buyers get to you? How did they find you?
I think her and her brother, my uncle, knew some people. I'm not sure how they knew them. It's always been one of those mysteries of it's one of the unanswered questions that I ask myself often is how do you find these people? Especially back then, because it wasn't like there wasn't Craigslist or Facebook. The internet wasn't in every home, so it was harder. And I just go, how, like, who are you hanging out with that just goes, hey, got a 6-year-old that I could come over and hang out with as a grown adult? And how do you even start that conversation? So I'm not exactly sure how they met these people or came to know them, but I'm sure word of mouth is a big one.
Mhm.
Uh, and we lived right outside of Chattanooga, which is a big, city. So right out of 75, hugely trafficked highway. Um, so I don't know if it was just by chance or if it was a planned and thought out thing.
All right, thank you. Um, what do you think of buyers in comparison to traffickers?
Um, I honestly think they're on equal playing fields because, and I've heard stories where traffickers have been, oh, well, I didn't actually do anything. I didn't actually hurt them. I didn't rape them. I didn't do A, B, and C, but you're providing it. It's kind of like, what's the difference between a drug dealer and a drug addict? Well, there wouldn't be a drug addict if you weren't giving them drugs. So I think the punishment should be equal and just as harsh. I think the punishments should be more, intense and harsh. And I think they go together. It's one and the same. One person's buying, the other one's profiting.
Thank you for that. And I agree with you that the punishment should be a lot harsher. So, um, do you think that the buyers ever considered you a victim?
No, 100% not. Um, at least that's what I like to think, because I don't like, I can't wrap my mind around someone going, this is a victim and I'm going to do this horrible thing anyways. And I think especially when you get into, like, my experience was childhood, but even when you get into like the older women who have been trafficked or still being trafficked because they were as a child, people like to justify it. And that's one of my biggest arguments all the time. They're like, oh, well, it's prostitution, they're choosing that. I'm like, are they choosing it? Like, do they feel like they have no other choice? Because that's not a choice. Is this something that they grew up in and this is the only way that they know? Because that is also not a choice. Anytime you are having to buy something, that's your choice. You were choosing to do this, but the person that's being bought or the thing that's being bought, like, has no control over it.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that so well. I hear that a lot too in trainings, especially with law enforcement, who will say they made a choice to do
Yeah.
that. And of course, especially when you're talking about someone like yourself, to whom it happened when you were a child, you certainly cannot say that, that they had a choice. What do you think of the term Johns?
Um, I I honestly, I don't understand it fully. I don't know why we call them Johns instead of abusers. I think it puts a pretty bow on a horrible act. And I also think it gives a perception for people who don't know tons about human trafficking to assume that all Johns or buyers are male, because that's also not the case. Just like not all traffickers are male, and not all victims are female. It it puts this hugely wide thing into a very small box, and we just, oh, well, John Doe. No, that's what you find in a morgue when they don't have an ID on them. A John, that's what a John is to me. A John is not an abuser. Like, that person is an abuser. So I don't personally love it, but I know it kind of makes it easier for others to talk about.
Mhm, mhm. Well, this is not on the list, but I think it's kind of related. What do you think of the term pimp?
I also don't like it. It's been glorified in rap songs and music videos, and it's one of those things, like, when I was in school, it was a fun thing for all the boys to say, "Oh yeah, I'm a pimp." And
Mhm,
do you know what that is? Like, it's not a pat on the back. It's not a good thing, but we've tried to make it a good thing through culture to make it more acceptable and less scary, but it's just glorifying
mhm.
abusers.
Yes, I agree with you completely, Autumn. I am going to turn things over to Nicole, and she's going to ask a few questions.
Hey, Autumn. It's good to see
Hey.
you. Um, Autumn, you mentioned that you first really learned about human trafficking from a conference. And that I was at that same conference, and we didn't know each other then. And so this is just truly very full circle. We both went our different ways and doing what we could. And it has been just really an honor to be able to watch you be such a strong advocate. And I know that people here today are going to really rethink a lot of things because of your very powerful testimony. And so I just have a few other questions. You mentioned that buyers come in all shapes and forms. They do not come in a specific mold. You also mentioned that you think that buyers have a tendency to really objectify and not see people or the women that they're abusing as anything more than an object. Would you have anything that you could add to what you want people to know about buyers?
I don't think inherently that they're all bad or that there's something so sick and twisted that can't be fixed. It's a really fine line. I was just having this conversation with some coworkers, and they were like, they should all just go to prison forever. And I'm like, okay, maybe like 2 years ago, I would have agreed with you. Maybe put them in a house, light it on fire or something. But now, like, I think that there can be redemption and restoration for them as well. Because if there's not, then what are we saying to the victims? Like, if we can be restored and we can be redeemed after this horrible thing that we've lived through, even if it's only just a one-time abuse, then why can't these people also be restored and redeemed? And why can't they use their story to go to other people who are, potential buyers or people that they know are buying and go, listen, I thought the same way you did, and this is what changed my mind, and this is what changed my life, and let's go get you some help. Because there's people that I'll never be able to reach, that none of us will never be able to reach, because we don't run in every circle. And so I think it's important that we don't just stick that label on them that they're irredeemable, because they can reach people that we can't.
That's really powerful. And I have had the privilege of seeing some men who are doing that. And just like you said, I mean, it is powerful. Their stories and reaching out to other men who were in the same place they were is really effective. Unfortunately, there aren't as many men doing that. And so we need people to really step up and to understand just how powerful that vulnerability would be. Did you ever have interactions with buyers outside of your exploitation?
I wouldn't consider my mother a buyer. There was abuse with that. So I think that would probably be the closest to it. And my uncle, because he would provide her with drugs. And then there was a little while that he moved into our house, so I had interaction with him. But outside of that, it was just a transaction based sort of deal. We never really had to do life together.
Why do you think people don't often talk about demand reduction?
I think it goes back to the calling it John's. It's an easy thing to not talk about. It's, let's help the victims. Let's get them from this victim mindset into a survivor mindset. Let's make sure that they're healed and they're whole and they feel better about life and have the skills and resources needed to move on with their life. And all of those things are greatly important, and they helped get me to where I am today. But most of that was at the expense of not talking about the other side of it. And I think if we start talking about the other side of it in a very real way and treating these people like people, because that's what we're asking everyone else to do, right? Is to treat us like people and not like some victim that they feel sorry for, or something to just be bought. Then we also have to think of the buyers, as horrible as it is, as people. Like, something happened to them, whether it be mental health or substance abuse or learned behavior, that made them act this way, that led them down this road to get to this point. And so, like, it's not an easy thing to think or talk about in a group without being that lone wolf that's like, oh, but we can help them too. And everybody's like, no, why would we help them? Why would we do that? They did something. Like, my husband's that way. He's like, why would we do that? Why would we help them? Let's just not. Let's just send them all to jail forever. And I'm like, that's not going to solve anything, though. It's not
Right.
going to stop anything. It's not going to put anything in place. But I think the more that we talk about them and demand reduction and make it possible for them to kind of step out of the shadows when they feel safe, the more we'll learn about it, and the more we'll learn kind of what triggers them and what brought them to this place in the first place.
Hmm. And as you said it earlier, you were trafficked by your mother from a really, really young age, 5 or 6, that you can remember. And um, do you think that there's a difference between men who are seeking out a child versus men who are seeking out an adult victim?
Um, I really don't know. Like, I'm not sure. When I got older and once I realized what trafficking was, uh, I really thought, I struggled with a long time of, how could anyone do this to a child? Like, we shouldn't do it to any person, but a child.
Mhm.
Uh, so I do think that there has to be, like, and I'm not sure what it is, but there has to be a draw somewhere where they're just maybe not turned on by older women. Like, maybe they need the prepubescent, or I'm not sure what the disconnect is, or where the line is drawn, but I do think that there's a difference.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, you've mentioned a couple things that you maybe not fully agree with about demand reduction work. One of them is tossing them in jail, throwing away the key, um, in treating them the way they treated their victims, which are objects, not human. Is there anything else that worries you about demand reduction and how it's been handled previously?
Um, I don't think it's been handled well, like, as far as when a John or an abuser is caught, the penalty is just so minimal.
Mhm.
Um, like, it's infuriating how minimal it is. Um, but also, like, one of the things that I really had to come to terms with when I really started feeling drawn to demand reduction is, I'm going to eventually, at some point, put myself in front of men who have bought other women or children. And that brings up a lot of emotions and, like, things that could possibly be triggering. But I think that it's an important thing to do to get to the other side of it. We can't just, at some point, we have to stop talking about, we're going to do this, and start implementing actual steps to reduce the demand.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, those are probably my biggest concerns with it.
So more focus on prevention before they
Yeah.
inappropriate punishment. Did you ever have a time when you were punished but a buyer wasn't punished?
I can't say that I have, because I mean, because I was so younger, and I mean, for me it was just a very normal thing. It was the equivalent of taking the trash out. It was just a chore for me. I assumed every kid lived this way. I didn't know any better, so I didn't know to say anything. The one time that I did speak up, I ended up going down to the police station, and it wasn't so much that I was punished, but it was that the abuser wasn't. Um, the cops went and talked to my mom, and my mom was like, "Oh no, he was under the influence. She was under the influence. It's fine. We'll work it out." I was from a small town, so the cops were like, "You handle it. We don't want to." And nothing ever came of it. So there was no punishment either way, other than just making me still be around this person.
Mm-hmm. What does accountability and justice look like for you?
Reduction, honestly, across the board, not just my abusers. With some of the work that I've done with some other organizations, I've actually got to talk with some people, and some of my abusers are dead. I've come to learn, and I went through a whole rabbit trail of kind of Googling everyone that I remembered to see where they were. Um, but I think that's really going to be the only justice that we see. I mean, and I don't think any of it will replace or make me feel better. I think that's one of the things that we talk about so much is, well, I want, this, if they go to jail, it'll make me feel better. Or if this happens to them, I'll feel better. But it doesn't change anything that's happened. It doesn't really correct anything. It doesn't change the years of therapy or the relationships that I ruined because of how my brain was wired as a child. So I really think that's the only justice that we're going to see, is that it doesn't happen, continue happening to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything that you wish you could tell buyers or potential buyers? You could have somebody who's thought about it or has in the past on this call. Is there anything that you wish they knew?
My story, honestly, and like other stories, not just mine, but like other survivors who are at a place of healing to where they can share and it not be traumatic for them anymore, to share their story. And eventually something will connect
Mm,
somewhere, and like, we are wired to form emotional attachments, and we are wired for relationship, and you can't hear something over and over without it having an impact. So like, just that, and that people are not things, no matter what you've been taught or what you've seen or experienced, growing up with other people in your life or other relationships. People are people, just like you have emotions and desires and needs and things that drive you. These other people, these victims, they also have emotions and desires and needs and things that drive them. And by committing this act, it completely wrecks the person. And I always feel weird when I talk about this, because I say that it completely wrecks the person, and then I've spent 20-30 minutes telling my story and answering questions and whatever else it may be, so it doesn't seem like it does. But what they don't see is the 10 plus years that I was in therapy twice a week, and my now adoptive parents coming in and me pushing them away, and you know them being clingy and driving by their house to make sure that they hadn't left, and spending the night, but making sure the door's closed and locked because I don't actually trust anybody, and all the
mm,
hardships that I put my husband through because I was like, you're a guy, so probably not going to work out because all men are evil. And I mean, just all of the relationships that it stopped, and all of the hardships and things that I still struggle with, you know, even now after all of this healing, those things just don't just go away. they can ease and we can get healing from them, but the body remembers.
Yeah. Well, Autumn, that is powerful. And I have certainly learned so much today. And I can say you have grown into strong woman you were always meant to be. It is, I mean, your journey of healing, because I was there. I saw you when you were first learning about trafficking, and seeing you now, it's like you have blossomed, and it's amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I am going to hand it over to Pam. I believe we have another panelist on the line, and so we will be speaking with her next.
Great.
Thank you, Autumn.
Thanks.
And Autumn, I just want to second what Nicole said. You are just such a person of strength to be able to have come out of what you have, and to be able to share and want to help other people, and the grace that you
Yes.
show buyers is amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
If you are able to stick around, because we've got our next panelist, and then at the end, we're gonna have a question and answer period. So if you are able to stay until that, we'd be grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I'm gonna bring Melissa on now. There she is. And there's Melissa. Y'all, I am so grateful that Melissa is able to join us. She had some things going on there at her office that she couldn't avoid, but she's here with us now. And I just met Melissa a couple of months ago myself, and have just so enjoyed getting to know her. And I'm going to ask you, Melissa, first of all, to unmute, and then just introduce yourself a little bit to the group, and then I'll ask you a few questions.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Thank you for being so graceful. My name is Melissa Elliott. I am a 53-year-old female who was human trafficked when I was 12. And I currently run a nonprofit organization. And I also sit on the city council, and I do a lot of things in my community. So that's me.
Melissa does a lot for her community, and is a strong woman as well. So we are going to jump into some questions now. So in your experience, Melissa, who were the typical buyers in your situation?
Well, in my situation, Pam, the buyers were Hispanic males, and they were probably between the ages, because I was 12, so I'm thinking between the ages of 40 and 60, 45 to 60 years old.
And just for the benefit of our attendees here, it might be helpful to give them some context into the venue that you were trafficked in as to why they were all Hispanic.
Okay. Yeah, I was trafficked in a bodega, which is just a store, a neighborhood store. They would take me there every Friday. My traffickers kept me locked in a room throughout the week. And on Friday, every Friday at 6 o'clock for 16 months, they took me to this bodega. So it was a bodega in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. The makeup of this particular city I was in was probably about 70% African American, 20% Hispanic, and maybe 10% Caucasians.
Thank you for that. So from your perspective, your lived experience, what do you think drives buyers' behavior?
I personally think that buyers have had some type of a trauma themselves. I truly believe that they have had some experience in their life that either made them want to be in control of a situation or where they lost total control of a situation. I don't think a person just wakes up and want to do this. And maybe that's just me thinking that because I see the good in everyone. I just believe that something has happened along the way that was unaddressed that drove them to, want to be involved with children.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can you think of anything that you think would deter buyers?
I believe that if buyers could get the help that they needed, um, whether that be mental health therapy, faith-based help, be able to share their what they're feeling in a non-judgmental setting. I think that would be helpful. I was listening to Autumn and I saw the total opposite end of the spectrum where working in the Department of Public Safety, you touch a child in North Carolina, you're going to get 50, 60, 70 years. And if you get 50, 60, 70 years and you never address the root cause analysis of why a person did that, you're just housing people in a warehouse with prison. So I don't think that's helpful. I don't think we can lock this problem away. I think the deterrent would be education and the access to service with no judgment.
Yeah. Thank you. And you have a lot of grace too, Melissa, to say that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How did your buyers find you? How do you think they knew to come to this bodega?
I believe that had all to do with my traffickers. And I don't think I was the only person they were taking there. I just know I went on Fridays. I was introduced through the traffickers. So I never knew who was going to be in the back. I knew there was one particular man, they called him Pop. He would always be there, but on some Fridays there would be a different men, and they all were Hispanic. So I really believe in my heart they were related, cousins, brothers. So I was introduced by the traffickers.
What do you think of buyers in comparison to traffickers?
Whew, that's a good question, Pam. Um, I think traffickers are controlling, and I'm only speaking from my personal experience. Traffickers want to be in control of things, but buyers, it's almost like a need, like demand, if you will. We are talking about demand reduction. So it's like they have a need to be with a child, or but the traffickers, they have a different mindset in my opinion. It seems to me that the traffickers, it's about money, it's about control, it's about dominance. Um, and just thinking, I'm just having a thought, just thinking about one of the buyers, like I could remember a man being extremely nice to me, and he was totally grown and I was totally a kid. And I remember the traffickers being extremely mean to me because I didn't do what they wanted me to do. So some of the buyers weren't mean to me. They had sex with me, but they weren't mean like the traffickers were. It was a need to be in control. It was just a need to be in control.
Thank you. Do you think the buyers ever considered you a victim?
I want to say yes. And I also want to say that because they had their own proclivities, maybe not as much as themselves. I think we all are victims, to be honest with you. I think they're victims. I think we were victims. and I have a different mindset for the trafficker. And I know that might sound crazy, but it just seems to me that the trafficker, they were the conduit of the transaction. And they were the ones that were mean and cantankerous and very cruel, to say the least.
Mhm. And so you feel like the buyers were victims in some way also of their mental health issues or whatever.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that something happened along the way that was never addressed. And it resulted in that behavior.
What do you think of the term Johns?
I think that's a derogatory term. Um, because even though these buyers, they're still people. So I just don't like that term, because to me it makes you sound dirty. It makes everybody sound dirty to me. Johns is just, to me, is a derogatory term. And I don't want to sound like I'm this buyer's advocate, because truly I'm not. I'm not. I just, after 53 years of living and just being engaged in community and watching people have the lack of needed health care, the lack of needed mental health, growing up in environments that they have no control over, I have a heart for people. And I understand that sometimes we can just not have the support or the resource that we need to get help. And Pam, personally, for me, like, this is probably the third time me even sharing my story. So, just think about if I could have got help 30 years ago, right? And I look at the buyer the same way. The trafficker, because I'm in the criminal justice field, I feel like they're just straight criminals. And that might sound really bad, but that's how I feel.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I am still going to be here, but I'm going to hand over the questioning duties to Nicole.
Hey, Melissa.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I have a few more questions. What do you wish people knew about buyers? And you may have already touched on some of it.
I wish that they knew the background of that individual, like what happened. Why do they do that? I don't think anyone does anything without a purpose or without a reason. So I just feel like something happened. I really believe that in my heart of hearts. And like I said earlier, just thinking back on some of my personal um, interactions with buyers, it was like they had a need to be needed, if that makes any sense. They weren't mean, and they weren't like that. I mean, I didn't like the fact that I had several grown men having sex with me when I was 12, but I just didn't see this mean person. It was like they had a need to be needed as well. So that, at my later age, helps me understand there was something that went wrong, like something was disconnected, and they need help. They need help.
Were those interactions that you're referring to, was that during your exploitation? Did you ever have the opportunity to interact with the buyers outside of that?
No, I never had an opportunity to interact with the buyers outside of the transaction or experience. I was only taken there once a week, and I only saw these men once a week, and I didn't see all of the same men every time I went. So no.
Why do you think people don't talk more often?
Because I don't think they understand it. I think most people want to just have a bad thought about people that do these kind of things. And again, I have to lean back on my own experience, you know, working in prisons and working around people that have committed these acts and have been convicted of these acts. They're people. Um, they are individuals. They are human. And so I think the reason why we don't talk about it a lot is because we don't understand it. And we need to understand why a 40-year-old man will want to sleep with a 12-year-old girl. I think that's not my expertise, but I think that we have professionals that can probably dissect that and help us understand why and what happened for them to even go in that direction. And I think that's why we don't talk about it, because we just want to just kind of make it bad. Okay, let's put this person in prison, but you still have a person in prison with an unresolved issue. And in the state of North Carolina, you know, they have these programs, and I'm thinking of Dark Cherry for sex offenders, and but everybody doesn't get to go to the program because you only have enough beds on state for a certain amount of people to go to that program. So think about the person that spends 25 years in prison for molesting or touching a child, and then they're released, and we haven't done anything to help them but house them. And so I think we don't talk about it a lot, Nicole, because we don't understand, and it's easier for us to lock it up. And that's just how I
Yeah.
feel about it.
It's just real black and white for people. There's no nuance. They're not humans. Throw away the key, which is
Right.
similar to what Autumn said as well. Now that we are learning more about demand reduction, and we have more of a demand reduction movement started in North Carolina, is there anything that worries you about how that's handled?
I would say what worries me about it is the lack of information. You know, the lack of information, because even now I still help try to house sex offenders, if you will, and nobody wants to touch these people. I mean, it doesn't matter if you go to prison and do 30 years. You come back into your community, you're still stigma. You still don't touch it. You still don't go near that person. Get your children away. And I understand some of the I understand, you know, that I wouldn't want to put my 3-year-old granddaughter in a room with a sex offender. But I also understand that these people are human beings, and that's the worry. The worry is the information, and how do we educate a community, and how do we get the people the help that they need if prison is there, all if that's where they're going. Like, how do we ensure that that person would had access to care to make sure they don't ever do that again? And that's my worry. That's my worry.
Right. That we know as a community, though, I can see that as a community could fall into the same trend that a buyer may have fallen into, which is not thinking of people as people and not digging deeper and just causing more harm. I agree with you. Do you ever have an experience in which a buyer was not punished, but you were punished?
Yes, I did. The first probably 5 to 7 times that I was taken to the bodega, I wasn't as cooperative as I probably should have been. And it resulted in punishment. You know, I got beat, kicked, uh, I got hurt a couple times. And so eventually I began to drink this. They had this, I think it was Puerto Rican moonshine, if you will. It was a big giant bottle with lots of fruit at the bottom. And so I remember this so vivid in my mind, but it was fruit, but it was alcohol, and it was clear like water. So after maybe around the fourth time, I just began to drink. They always offered me a drink, but I wouldn't. And so I fought back. I wasn't cooperative, and they would tell my buyer that, and then they would beat me. And so around about the fourth time, I'm gonna say I just started drinking so I wouldn't feel anything. And I would do that. And so I would drink, and so I wouldn't have to get beat anymore. I got hit in the face with bottles, full bottles of beer. Uh, my eye at one point was totally closed. Um, they would just hit me in my face and in my head a lot. I got kicked in my stomach, knocked on the ground, and I was trafficked by women. And so, you know, it was different. But yeah, I got beat a couple of times for not cooperating.
Melissa, that's horrifying to even hear. I'm so sorry
Yeah,
that you
thank-
experienced that. If you could have accountability and justice, what would that look like?
That would look like help. That would look like help for the buyers. I'm going to even say help for the traffickers. Um, People need help. And so for me to sit here and be like, lock them up, you know, that's not in my heart. I'm not that person. God didn't create me to be that way. I've been able to sustain my life and live a somewhat normal life through my faith. And so I would just say help. People need to be able to access help, help in a non-judgmental way, help, even if it has to be a judgment from the judge, like, you know, give them the opportunity to have help. And so justice to me is not just locking someone up in prison. I've worked in prisons. There is no changing of your mind. You can't transformatively think if you just put me in a cell and lock me there and let me eat and go home. But I would say the justice should always involve, if it has to be mandated services. And if the person didn't want to participate, then that's on them. But they need access to care. That's, you can't, it has to be holistic, because if you just put me in prison and tell me I'm going to 15 years for what I just did, and you don't help me change the way I think, then I'm going to come out and probably do it 15 more times to 15 more people. So help, justice, restorative justice. I love restorative justice. So something to help them restore back to their original selves, if possible.
That is powerful. And we on the task force definitely believe in restorative justice as well. I'm wondering, you know, there could be, as I said to Autumn, there could be people on the call that have purchased in the past. They could love someone who is purchasing currently. What do you think, if you could tell previous buyers, potential buyers, current buyers, if you could tell them anything, what would that be?
Ooh, I would tell them to get help. Get help. People, and this is something I shared with Pam. Pam was so powerful when she first met her. But Pam helped me identify a word, and that word for me was invisible, because that's how I felt when I was being trafficked. And so I would say to a buyer or potential buyer, see these people, see these children as such, see them, you know, look at them. Um, you don't want to have a part in traumatizing someone for the rest of their lives. You don't want to be that individual, you know, that can derail the trajectory of someone's life. And that's what I would say. Like, just don't do it. Get help. Get help, because help is there. We just have to. And I love this demand reduction task force. Y'all almost make me want to join it, and I got 100 things on my plate. But I really would love to see people be able to walk into a safe space and say, I was thinking about buying a child, but I'm here because I want help. I would love to see the day that would be a safe place to just surrender, right? what you're feeling because you don't want to affect someone in a traumatic way for the rest of their life. So, yes, help. Don't do it. Get help.
Thank you, Melissa. That is powerful. We have 47 participants on this call today. So you all are sending a ripple effect throughout North Carolina with your very powerful words and insights and expertise. And I know that panelists have questions. I am already seeing a few questions, but if anybody else has questions, if you could please put them in the chat now. And let me go back and see.
I was just going to point out too, Nicole, that we do have 47 folks with us, but we had a lot more than that registered, and all of them will receive a recording. So, and we know that the recordings get shared. And so
Yes.
we are just grateful for the impact that both of you are having today and will have.
Yes, absolutely. So the first question that I'm seeing is from Lisa, and she asks both panelists, what agency or resource would you all have found most beneficial for obtaining help to escape from your traffickers?
You want me to go first, Autumn?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say for me, it was the police department. The police, because they can get you out of that situation. So police, and then I don't know. After that, because I really didn't have this. This wasn't talked about in the '80s, so it wasn't even a thing back then. So when I was delivered back to the door of my mom's home after 16 months of being gone, she just had this defiant teenager that was very angry, very hurt. So I would definitely say a mental health service, but I didn't receive that at the time.
Yeah, I think police would be a big one. Now, like where I grew up, it was really small town, and the one time that I did, go to the police, it didn't really take us anywhere. The one that did help me, that kind of got me out, was a teacher overheard me bragging because, like I said, I thought it was normal to some of my friends about how many guys I had been with. And she stepped up and told the state. And then that's when the state stepped in and got me, took me into foster care. But after, a couple months, they sent me right back to my mom. I believe that's changed now. It was a different time. It was 90s then. So I think education in school, having those resources available, letting the resource officers that are at school, I mean, they're in most schools now, middle and high school at least, be a friendly face and someone that the kids can trust to go to and talk to.
Yes, thank you. And that, to piggyback on that, we have another question from Annie. And she asked, did you go to school? And I know you did, Autumn. And Melissa, you could jump in there as well. And her follow-up question is, do you think classmates or teachers could have known something was wrong? And what should we tell our kids?
During my experience of being trafficked, I did not go to school. I was out of school for about 16 months. Well, maybe not 16 total months, maybe about, because we have to count in the summertime. So I was probably out of school a good year. So no, I was not in school, but I do work in a school now. I am the social and emotional learning coordinator. I forgot to throw that out there. So many titles. But I do think that the school is definitely a safe place, and someone needs to be trained. Something I'm really pulling on Pam about right now, as far as social workers and counselors and teachers, and because they have first eyes on these children, and you could have a child in your classroom that's being trafficked and not even know it. So yeah, I think the school should have. I totally agree with you, Autumn. there should be some type of curriculum or some type of training to make sure that people can see what they don't see with the natural eye.
Yeah. And I've worked with a few organizations where we went into schools and done a conference, like a small mini conference with, you know, each class. So the wording is kind of a little bit different to so that it's understandable for each age group. I think teachers need to be trauma informed. I think school counselors, principals, I mean, when thinking back on my childhood, there's no reason one of my teachers should not have recognized something and been like, that's a red flag. Like maybe she's not just acting out, or why is she asleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Is that normal? And like, what steps do you take after that when you realize that? Like there needs to be a whole plan in place that goes to every school nationwide. We put so much on our teachers and we ask them to teach our kids, but we're also asking them to protect our kids, you know, whether it's ours personally or other kids that are going to school. And they need the training and they need to be prepared on how to figure that out and like what to do when a red flag is raised.
And can I add to that right quickly? I think the thing about the personnel in the school being trained, because there are a lot of young ladies right now in school that don't even know that they're involved in trafficking. These are some of your homeless youth that are living with someone that they're having sex with to stay in their houses to give them money. And so I think that it's critical that, you know, school personnel is trained specifically in human trafficking. I think, you know, we look at a lot of different areas of child abuse and neglect and, you know, sexual exploitation, all types of things, but I think they really, really need to understand because it looks so different in so many different places. So I just want to say it.
I will mention that a couple of years ago, the General Assembly did legislate mandatory training for school personnel. It's the statute states that they have to have 2 hours every 2 years of child sexual abuse and child sex trafficking training, which isn't a lot, but they are supposed to be getting that. I will mention too that there's no enforcement mechanism in that statute, so it is not necessarily happening in every school district.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think it needs to be made available for all, like not just school teachers and counselors, but anyone in a leadership role. I think it should be across the board in churches and leadership and just easily accessible, because it's not easy to sit down for 2 hours and to listen to somebody talk about human trafficking. Like that's hard for anybody who signs up for it, much less people who have no idea going into it. It's a lot of information. I'm not sure how we would do that, but I think it might help more with the retention of the knowledge if it was just, I don't know, like maybe a website that was sent out to all teachers or something. I'm not sure how to do it, but it does need to be made more available and go across the board.
I agree. We did have one question about school social workers. And so the question is, well, the statement is that they need to be trained, but how do we access their time and advocate for them to get trained? And I don't know if any other panelist has information on that. That would be really helpful. Annie said Oh, go ahead.
I think I have some information, and I'm pulling on Pam for this. She can tell you that now. We do have a scheduled training coming up for law enforcement in this area, and we've called all the region to come. But I also asked Pam if she would be able to give a training session for the educators to come out, and the administrators. Our superintendent here is all for it. So I think it's just a matter of you having that conversation with the superintendent and maybe some of your local elected officials. Just find the one that has a heart for this and let them drive it for you. So in my case, I am that one, and I spoke with my city manager. My chief of police is totally excited that this training is coming. They offer a block of human trafficking and BLET, but I think that this is a bit more personable for law enforcement and for the educators, that they can actually see something real versus something that they watched in a movie or something that someone said, but this will actually be real-time information. So I would say to whoever it was that wants to advocate, just go to your superintendent. Talk with your administrators, get Pam, get Pam on board.
Or
And,
Nicole.
or Nicole, grab these two women and let them help you drive it. Because for me, the driver has been Pam. And Pam, just by Pam exposing me to this world of education, if you will, I want to make sure everyone that I come in contact with can get the same information. Pam really opened a major door for my life when she came to do my story, and it's helping me help others. And so when I went to the community college and talked with the BLET and criminal justice head, I was like, listen, we want to start with law enforcement first and let law enforcement, because for me, at the end of my story, law enforcement are the ones that brought me home. So I think it's critical that law enforcement understand that they are not the therapist, you are not the counselor, you do not have to be the one that know the right language. Your job is to get these children home. And so, we've scheduled something for the 22nd that's going to be pretty big, because I believe it's been shot out to at least 20 to 30 plus law enforcement agencies. So I'm excited about that. But to answer the question, I would say go to the stakeholders in your community, go to your superintendent, and get them on board with you so that they can bring this to your community.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Go ahead. Just to piggyback off that, one of the things that I've learned and realized by going into the school system is most of these teachers, if you talk to them and you tell them, hey, we're doing a training on this day, most of them are going to volunteer their time. It doesn't have to be a mandatory thing. Like, these teachers have a heart for kids and they want to know and they want to learn. So if you will make the effort to do a training, or even something like this, like a seminar, you could do it through Facebook, Zoom. There's so many options now. If you give them that opportunity, most of them will just be like, yes, for sure, I want to be there, let me know when.
Yes, teachers are my favorite angels on earth, honestly. And I mean, it's important to note too that when the state mandated training, they didn't provide any kind of fiscal note to that. So it really is kind of one of those things where we have to stay in front of schools and make it an easy training for them to attend, on their schedules, and rather than it be kind of staked down, there's only one training. It really has kind of taken on form of what region you're in and what organization's working there. Sierra wanted to mention Abolition and C is a great resource for training in the school systems. And I agree, they have a training that can be done. It's self-paced, and they've created a really excellent curriculum for teachers and for students. Another question, so transitioning to a new topic, there was a case recently all over the news about a 17-year-old female that was killed by that killed her trafficker and was sued by the family, and the family won. Do you believe, as many others believe, that she was victimized by the abuser and then again by the legal system?
Yes. 100% yes. I mean, I can't think of any other answer. It's and it goes back to we've pled the battered women's defense. It's the same principle.
Mm,
You've been abused for so long, and I mean this is self-defense. This is your freedom or their life. And you know, I didn't hear about the story, but I'm assuming if it came to that, she had been trafficked for some time. And I mean, one time is too many. So yes, 100%.
and back to your point, Autumn, about being trauma informed, I think there is just, well, there's a growing awareness about how trauma affects behavior and brain development and brain function and how you perceive the world. And, you know, any kind of trauma can, with a young brain, can cause your brain to really go on protection mode. And you may interpret a something that is not an imminent threat as being more dangerous. So I don't know the details of that case either. And I would agree with you that in general, that there are people that are who are survivors, who are in an exploitive situation and are fighting for their lives. And then I've seen prosecutors take those same girls on and make the case that, you know, that the amount of defense that they took in the heat of that moment was too far, and it, you know, resulted in the death of the buyer or the trafficker. However, when you start learning more about trauma and how from that person's perspective they are fighting for their lives constantly, and even there could be a misjudgment even if something wasn't an imminent threat to their death. But if you've experienced trauma over and over again, you may not perceive that fully. You may see that is completely trying to save your life. So yeah, I would love to see every school, every court, every DA, everyone in the justice system get a very good understanding of trauma and how that can affect behavior. And I think if we were to be able to do that, I think that it would change the whole system. Well, I'm talking too much. Pam, do you have any other additional comments, or Melissa or Autumn, if you do? I don't see any more questions in the chat. If you have a burning question, we still have a little bit of time. You're welcome to put it in.
I don't think I have anything. I'm excited about everybody who's doing work for demand reduction. And I, you know, like I said before, I'm all for it, and figuring out what is causing the demand so that we can eventually get the reduction.
If it's okay, Nicole, I want to address the comment from Lyle. It says, I'm so surprised for both panelists concerned for the offenders and to the question why they did this to them and what caused them to victimize others. For me, this has been a long time. So, you know, I've held on to forgiveness in my heart. And I think my faith plays a lot for me to feel the way I feel. And we're talking 40 years after the fact. There would be no reason for me to be angry, no reason for me to be revengeful, if you will, to these people that hurt me, because I feel like they were, I don't want to say they were part of the problem. Again, I see my trafficker as such, but I see the offender as a victim as well, because again, something happened. People just don't wake up and say, I want to be with a child. Like something happened. And without the proper treatment, without the care, without, you know, what trauma happened to them being addressed, then I can see them traumatizing others. So I have a heart for human beings. So it's not that I'm just this person that love the people that hurt me. No, it's not. I'm 53 years old, and it took a long time. I was very angry, Lyle. I was angry at my mother. I was angry at myself. I thought it was my fault because I ran away from home. So that anger and all that stuff through time, I've healed from that. But I'm not a person that wants to be vengeful and say, well, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth type thing. That's just not my heart. And so, but that took time, Lyle. That didn't happen overnight. And I'm a very forgiving person. So, and they're humans. And I just wanted to say that. So it's not that I came out the gate when I was 12, 13, 14. I was very messed up. I was totally defiant, I felt like I was invisible. Uh, I did a lot of things that a young person should not have ever experienced as a result of being trafficked. And so, but my life has given me grace. And when you're given grace, you want to give grace back. So that's definitely not something that happened overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Melissa 100%. It was never a, oh, okay, I've been trafficked. You know what? Let me help those people because bless their little hearts. It was never that. Like, it was just in the last year, honestly, that I have turned this page, and even still talking about it today, there's been several times where I've just went, do I want to help them? I do, because like Melissa said, it's a faith thing. I have hurt people, not to that level, obviously, but I've hurt people and I've received forgiveness. I've received mercy and grace that I didn't deserve. My faith very much tells me that I am to forgive as much as I've been forgiven, and I've been forgiven a lot. So it's a step-by-step thing, and honestly, it changes from day to day and time from time. If I am in the middle of a flashback, do not ask me if I want to give these people redemption, because I probably don't. But today, you know, let's try to help them as much as we can.
I think something that you two might be interested in, and hopefully some of our participants would be interested in too. And Nicole, I don't want to steal your thunder if you were already planning to talk about this, but the Demand Reduction Task Force has several different teams that are working on different issues related to demand reduction. And, one of those is curriculum. So, that's been discussed here today. One of those is media awareness and engagement. One of those is law enforcement engagement. So there's a lot of different ones, but the one that I specifically wanted to mention is that both of y'all have mentioned that the buyers, there's something in them. There's a mental health issue in some of them, at least. And so I wanted to mention that one of our teams is a treatment team, and that group is investigating, different treatment options. One of the issues that they have found is that they haven't yet found a treatment that is specifically for sex buyers. There are treatments, for sex offenders or for child sex offenders, that kind of thing. But our thinking and the general thinking seems to be that there's a difference in someone who believes they are purchasing a consensual sex act. That is different from someone who is sexually assaulting someone. I mean, that there's a different mindset there. And so they are searching for treatment options for someone who has compulsive behavior. And so it may be, going in the direction of what is commonly referred to as a sex addict, that treatment for that might be appropriate, but that group is investigating. And so we wanted to mention it in case there's anyone participating today who's interested in that, that team is looking for help, as are, all of our teams are always open to having new members. So I had just put in a couple of minutes ago a website into the chat, which is the website for our task force, ncdemandreduction.com. And on that website is a list of our teams and thank you, Nikki, for putting it there again. On that website is a list of all the different teams and what it is they're working on, as well as the facilitator and the facilitator's email. So if you are interested, we would, strongly encourage you to contact the facilitator and let them know that you'd like to join the work.
Awesome, Pam.
Nicole, did you want to tell folks about our next webinar?
How about you? You're on a roll, Pam. How about you do it?
Okay. So our webinar for next week is going to be interesting as well. We're going to have a former sex buyer and a survivor on the same panel. And the even more interesting thing is they're married. So our colleague from Legacy of Hope International, which is the third nonprofit that helped form the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force, Bryn Journey, is going to facilitate that webinar next week. And I will, in just a minute, I'll put in the chat box a direct link to that. You can also find that link on our website, ncdemandreduction.com. But we would welcome you to join us for that one. And just so you know, all of you who are here today and anyone who registered, this is being recorded. And so we'll send out an email within the next few days that has the recording. So if you have colleagues or friends that you think would be interested in this topic, that you could share the recording with them.
Well, thank you so much for everybody who joined us. Autumn and Melissa, that was incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom that you really earned the very hard way over the last several decades. We're so grateful for your strength. It inspires and just you have changed the course, I believe, for a lot of people who are on this call or who will receive the recording. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all for having me.
What she said.
Okay, well, we are at time. We really appreciate you joining us for today's webinar, and we expect to see you next Wednesday. There was a question about how to register for the next one. If you go to the our website, the ncdemandreduction.com, you should find a link there. And it's a very easy registration process.